There were moments when you looked around and saw nothing but silence, no voice, no hand reaching out, no sign in the sky. And you whispered to yourself, if God is real, why does this hurt so much? But hear me now. Just because you could not see me does not mean I was not there. I watched every tear fall in rooms where no one else noticed. I saw the battles you never spoke about because you were tired of explaining yourself to people who could not understand your pain. You were watched, not with judgment, but with care. When you were fighting wars in your mind at 2047 a.m., when sleep avoided you and fear sat beside your bed like an uninvited guest. I was there. You assumed silence meant abandonment, but silence was protection. Because if you had seen everything I blot, everything I stopped before it reached you, everything that tried to destroy you but failed, you would finally understand why you are still standing. You did not survive by accident. There were attacks meant to break your spirit before it ever matured, moments designed to make you quit before you understood your calling. But I watched. When others underestimated you, when they spoke about you behind closed doors, when they doubted your future because they could not see what I placed inside you, I watched, and I did not intervene immediately. Not because I didn't care, but because some battles train you for what is coming next. You think strength appears suddenly. No, strength is forged in pressure. I allowed you to walk through storms not to drown you, but to teach you how to breathe underwater. There were times you felt targeted, as if life itself had singled you out. You asked, why me? Because you could handle what others would have collapsed under. Because you carry something rare, something dangerous to darkness. And darkness always tries to extinguish what threatens it. Every delay, every rejection, every closed door, none of it escaped my attention. I saw how you kept showing up even when you were exhausted. I saw how you kept believing, even when belief felt foolish. I saw you hold yourself together in public while falling apart in private. And I want you to hear this clearly. I was not watching to be entertained. I was watching to prepare you. Some of the battles you fought were never about the situation. They were about who you were becoming. You thought the pain meant you were losing, but pain was evidence of growth. A seed breaks before it rises. Steel burns before it strengthens. And you were never meant to live an untouched life. You were meant to live a purpose-driven one. There were moments I held back answers not to confuse you, but to sharpen your discernment. There were times I let people walk away because they were weights, not partners. You cried over relationships I allowed to end, not realizing I was saving you from future destruction. I watched every goodbye that broke your heart, and I promise you, not one of them was wasted. You assumed no one noticed how hard you tried. You assumed your efforts disappeared into nothing. But heaven keeps records you cannot see. Every prayer whispered in frustration, every tear mixed with hope, every moment you chose faith over bitterness. I saw it all, and I am not late. This season you survived was never meant to define you. It was meant to refine you. What nearly destroyed you will soon introduce you. You were watched when you wanted to give up. You were watched when you stayed anyway. You were watched when you doubted yourself, but still took one more step forward. And now, hear me carefully. The battles you thought were random were actually monitored. Nothing touched you without permission. Nothing lasted longer than it needed to, because I knew the ending before the pain ever started. You wondered why the pressure never felt normal, why your struggles seemed heavier, longer, and more personal than those around you. You watched others move forward easily, while you had to fight for every inch of progress. And quietly, you asked me, did I do something wrong? No. The intensity of the battle was not a punishment. It was a signal. The opposition rises in proportion to the assignment. Darkness does not waste energy attacking empty vessels. Resistance does not chase ordinary paths. The pressure you faced was proof that what you carry matters. There were moments when life attacked from every direction at once. Your peace, your finances, your relationships, your confidence. It felt coordinated, calculated. That was not your imagination. Some battles are not random events. They are responses. When you decided not to quit, when you chose integrity over shortcuts, when you refused to become bitter like those who hurt you, something noticed. You see, not every attack comes to destroy you. Some come to delay you. Some come to distract you. Some come to convince you that you are weaker than you are. Because if you ever fully realized who you are becoming, you would stop negotiating with fear. So the attacks increased. You were tested where you were most sensitive. hit where you were most hopeful, challenged in the areas you cared about the most. And you thought if God was watching, why didn't he stop this? Because stopping it would have robbed you of vision. You needed to see how strong you were becoming in real time. I allowed pressure because pressure reveals truth. It reveals who stays when comfort disappears. It reveals what you trust when control is taken away. It reveals whether your faith is inherited or chosen. And you chose me, even when it hurt. The reason the attacks were intense is because your future is non-negotiable. What you are walking toward cannot be carried by a fragile version of you. You needed depth, discernment, spiritual endurance. And those things are not learned in comfort. There were moments I let the fire burn longer, not because I enjoyed your pain, but because purification takes time. Gold is not refined by a single flame. Strength is not built by one challenge. You were being prepared for rooms where excuses would no longer protect you. You were attacked emotionally because you are meant to carry emotional weight for others. You were attacked mentally because clarity will be your weapon. You were attacked relationally because where you are going, loyalty will matter. Nothing was accidental. Some of the people who hurt you were allowed to reveal themselves early so they could not access your next level. You mourned connections that I intentionally removed. What you thought was loss was strategic separation. You survived confusion so you could recognize truth quickly. You survived betrayal so you would stop trusting words over patterns. You survived loneliness so you would stop depending on crowds for validation. The attacks were intense because the lesson had to be permanent. And listen carefully now. The enemy overplayed his hand. He pushed too hard. He revealed too much. He exposed his strategy. What was meant to exhaust you ended up educating you. Now you see differently. You hear differently. You feel differently. You are not naive anymore. That's why the attacks are slowing down. Not because the assignment disappeared, but because you are no longer the same target. You thought endurance meant surviving quietly, but endurance is transformation under pressure. And you passed tests you didn't even know you were taking. You were entering a phase where what once overwhelmed you will barely move you. Because now you know, the intensity was never about destruction. It was about development. There were moments you prayed with everything you had. Not polite prayers, not rehearsed words, desperate ones. Tears in your voice, your chest tight, your heart exhausted. You said my name like it was the last rope holding you above the fall. And when nothing changed immediately, you wondered if your prayers had hit the ceiling and fallen back to the floor. You asked yourself quietly, did God hear me, or did I pray too late? Hear me now. I heard every single word, even the ones you couldn't say out loud, even the ones that came out as silence, even the ones that were just tears. But my silence was not absence. It was precision. You see, stepping in too early would have comforted you, but it would not have completed you. There are rescues that feel merciful and rescues that are actually premature. I did not want to save you from the process when the process was saving you from a weaker future. You asked me to remove the pain. I was focused on removing what would eventually destroy you. You asked me to change the situation. I was changing you, and I know that answer frustrated you. Because when you're hurting, growth feels like neglect. There were moments you believed that if I truly cared, I would have stopped the heartbreak, ended the waiting, silenced the confusion. But had I done that, you would have stayed attached to things that were never meant to last. You would have settled for less because less felt familiar. I watched you struggle not because I enjoy struggle, but because I knew what comfort would cost you. Comfort would have kept you dependent. Comfort would have kept you dependent. Comfort would have delayed your discernment. Comfort would have left you unprepared. And I refuse to bless you in a way that makes you fragile. There were prayers I answered quietly. You asked for strength. I gave you endurance. You asked for clarity. I gave you time. You asked for relief. I gave you resilience. Because what you are walking into requires more than temporary relief. I know you felt abandoned when answers didn't arrive on your timeline, but timing is not delay when it is intentional. Some things had to fall apart fully so you would never try to rebuild them again. I let you reach the end of yourself so you would finally stop relying on what could not sustain you. Pride had to loosen its grip. Fear had to lose its authority. Illusions had to collapse. And that only happens when there is no immediate escape. You cried out, God, why won't you do something? And I was doing something. I was rewiring your instincts. I was sharpening your boundaries. I was teaching you to hear my voice without constant reassurance. You are learning how to walk by faith, not by emotional confirmation. That kind of faith is not taught in calm seasons. It is learned when silence forces you to decide what you truly believe. I let the night stretch longer so the morning would mean more. I let the weight remain so you would build the strength to carry purpose without collapsing. And here's the truth most people never hear. If I had stepped in earlier, you would have thanked me, but you would not have changed. And I care more about your transformation than your temporary comfort. You survived moments that should have broken you, not because you were lucky, not because you were strong on your own, but because I was watching closely and measuring exactly how much you could handle. Never more, never too late. Now look at yourself. You don't beg the way you used to. You don't panic the way you used to. You don't chase the way you used to. That is not coincidence. That is growth born from waiting. You thought unanswered prayers meant rejection, but many of those prayers were answered with preparation. And now you are ready for what would have crushed the old you. You thought the season was about survival. You believed the pain was random, that the waiting was unnecessary, that the pressure was excessive. But hear me now, slowly, clearly. This season was not about breaking you. It was about building the version of you that could not be destroyed. Everything you endured had direction. The isolation, the delay, the unanswered questions, the moments you had to encourage yourself because no one else knew how. You were not being punished. You were being positioned. I was preparing you for clarity without noise. That's why distractions were removed. That's why people fell away. That's why silence surrounded you. You were learning how to hear me without needing constant affirmation. Because where you were going, confusion will be expensive. I was preparing you for authority without arrogance. That's why you were humbled. That's why shortcuts were denied. That's why success took longer than expected. If elevation had come too early, it would have corrupted you. Now, when doors open, you will walk through them grounded, not inflated. I was preparing you for discernment without paranoia. You were betrayed so you would stop romanticizing intentions. You were disappointed so you would start watching patterns. Now you can love deeply without being easily manipulated. That balance is rare. I was preparing you for impact without burnout. You learned how to function without applause, how to stay consistent without recognition, how to keep moving when motivation disappeared. So when influence comes, you won't be addicted to validation. You'll be stable. You were trained in the dark because light exposes what darkness teaches. And now when you step forward, your confidence will not be loud. It will be unshakable. There is a reason you outgrew what once excited you. A reason old habits stopped satisfying you. A reason shallow conversations drain you now. That's not boredom. That's alignment. You are stepping into a season where provision will match responsibility, where opportunities will require maturity, where your words will carry weight, where your presence will bring calm instead of chaos. But that kind of season only works on someone refined. You ask why you had to learn things the hard way, because easy lessons fade, but earned wisdom stays. What you carry now cannot be taken from you. I watched you lose things you thought you needed, but I was making room for what you couldn't imagine yet. Some blessings require empty hands. You will soon notice something shift. Not fireworks, not noise, clarity. Decisions will come easier. Peace will feel natural. Fear will lose its volume. You won't chase confirmation anymore. You will move with knowing. And listen carefully. This matters. Your testimony will not be dramatic. It will be undeniable. People will ask how you stayed sane, how you didn't turn bitter, how you kept going without support, and you won't need long explanations. Your life will answer for you. The season you survived gave you spiritual muscle. Now comes assignment. Not rush, not pressure, purpose. I did not waste your pain. I did not overlook your tears. I did not ignore your prayers. I watched everything. And now, I trust you with what comes next. So lift your head. You are not behind. You are not forgotten. You are not late. You are ready.